Hello everyone, my name's tomatoanus, also known as the Whittle Wiener Wielder, and today we're going over a segmented any percent speedrun of Half-Life 2 and how the world record holder Peng beats the game in under 40 minutes. Peng put together this run special for this video and also helped with writing the script to make sure it's all as accurate as possible. This is specifically a speedrun of the any percent no void clip category. The typical rules of any percent apply, but void clipping isn't allowed. Void clipping is when you utilize tick-perfect saving and loading to maintain horizontal velocity while you're out of bounds in the void. While void clipping allows you to cut across levels and shave about 3 minutes off your time, it adds like 15 minutes of loading screens to the run, and it's super annoying to perform, so in general, no void clip is the more popular category. Real quick, we gotta talk movement. The main movement tech is accelerated hopping, AHOP for short. There's a limit to how fast you can move, and if you start going above that limit, the game adds speed opposite the direction you're moving. But it is possible to trick the game into thinking you're moving a different direction than you are. Peng has a command called plus strafe bound to his spacebar. With the plus strafe command, whenever he holds space, he can use his mouse to move Morgan Freeman around. By using this to move backwards whenever he jumps forward, the game thinks that he's traveling backwards and hitting the speed cap, so it keeps adding speed forwards to slow him down, not knowing that he's actually traveling forwards. A-hopping forward and back are called accelerated forward hopping, AFH, and accelerated back hopping, ABH. You can also accelerated side hop, ASH, which requires you to press both S and one of the side directional keys at the same time, and there's a bit more detail to them, but they're more niche than AFH and ABH. Lastly, due to how Half-Life 2 applies speed caps, you gain speed faster if you're crouched and walking as opposed to sprinting. Alright, why don't we get into the run? Previously on tomatoanus.
I accidentally made a lot of me by time traveling. Yeah, you don't get your time machine back. Anyway, as for the Chicago guys you accidentally made. You know what? I'm starting to think that time travel ain't what it's cracked up to be. Oh great, now I gotta walk home. Uh-oh.
Hey, what are you guys doing here?
We're here to talk about display.
I know that. The unique metal posters that trying to capture your passions.
Exactly. There are over 2 million artworks available, including art officially licensed from brands like Elden Ring, Warhammer, Star Wars, and more.
That also manufactured in Illinois, alright, we can pull high A's, right?
Huh? Sorry, I said they're also manufactured in the EU and arrive within 4 to 5 days, right? Yes, and they're incredibly easy to mount on your wall. It takes 20 seconds and no tools required. Hey, you guys doing all right? Yes. Oh, okay. Display also now has Textura, a poster line with 3D contours, tactile textures, and selective matte and gloss effects. Can I use the link in the description, displate.com/tomatoanus, for 25% off when I order 1 displate and 35% off when I order 2 or more? Yes. I'm just gonna keep walking now and they're gone. Whoa. Fuck.
So the run opens with a minute-long cutscene that you can't speed up or skip, but you can walk around during it and rotate G-Man, which, that's pretty fun, I guess. After G-Man's speech about how gamers need to rise up and take back what's theirs, Peng is going to save load lag to clip out of the train. Using the game's console, he has a button bound to making a save and loading it at the same time. This is called a save load. If you repeatedly save load and chain together a bunch of saving and loading, NPCs and moving objects freeze for an amount of time relative to the number of saves and loads you chained. Save load lagging stops the train cars for a moment before they try to snap back into place, and doing that a second and a half after the game begins causes the trains to snap back into place incorrectly, with the train car behind Peng clipping into his car and pushing him out of it. He A-hops here and ramps off the sloped surface of a bumper on the train track to launch over some invisible walls. He takes no fall damage since you're invincible at this part of the game. He takes a collect call on the road here and hits a trigger to start a cutscene, then moves slowly since if he moves too fast, he'll lock the NPCs in place and be unable to progress. He has to wait for the cutscene to finish so an invisible wall disappears, and he can then take his call into the small fenced area. So there's a piece of tech in the game called quantum crouching. It's done by crouching and then uncrouching, but you then crouch again before the game finishes uncrouching you. This puts you into a state where you're technically crouched, but your camera's in the normal standing position. If you hold a prop and uncrouch while you're in this state, your camera instantly gets moved down, then back up as the game tries to keep up with whether or not you should be crouched. Peng uses quantum crouching to more easily do an exploit called teleporting. Valve implemented a failsafe for if NPCs get stuck during a scripted scene. If an NPC gets blocked by something like a prop, then the NPC gets teleported to their destination. Peng is going to exploit teleporting by using quantum crouching to slam props into the heads of NPCs during scripted moments. This will teleport them to their destination and skip parts of scripted scenes. You don't have to quantum crouch in order to teleport people though. In fact, most runners don't even use quantum crouching, but Peng feels like that it makes teleporting easier for him. Teleporting isn't a one-size-fits-all solution though. Like, you can't just use it on every NPC to skip every scripted scene in the game. It depends a lot on how the scenes are structured, what the NPC's end goal is, and more. Oh, also a random side note, we don't get the HEV suit until the 3rd chapter, so until then, Peng is limited to just crouching and walking. No sprinting or running. As soon as the security door opens in front of him, Peng tells the Combine soldier the call is from Bob We Otta Baby It's a Boy and uses the phone to teleport him twice. This brings him to a room with a long cutscene in it where he'll grab a book and use it to make some Combine guys disappear like the cysts they are. This begins the over minute-long cutscene that has no applicable skip. There is technically a way to skip the cutscene with a glitch called B-box rotation, but it's pretty inconsistent and seemingly random, so it's really just in the proof of concept stage right now. While he waits for the cutscene, let's talk about a totally not controversial exploit used in runs that I'm sure won't elicit any comments below regarding this run's validity. Save deletion. Similar to Valve implementing a failsafe for if NPCs get stuck in scripted moments, they also implemented a failsafe in case the game can't find your save. If you attempt to load a save the game can't find, then the game loads you in with full health at the start of the map from your most recently loaded save. Speedrunners use the command console to bind a key that creates and loads a save with a really long name. More specifically, the save Peng makes is named This name is too long for the game to handle, so the game gives up and spawns you at the start of the map with full health, which is pretty much the same effect as just loading a map using the console, though this is technically allowed in speedrun since you're just making and loading a save with a long name. So here Peng uses quantum crouch to bonk Barney and teleport him to his destination next to a door that he opens. After climbing this ladder and jumping out the window, Peng does his first save deletion as he opens this door and enters the next map. This loads him in at the start of the map, which is a few steps ahead of him, and deloads the door at the top of the stairs so he doesn't have to open it. He save loads to walk through this NPC, which is only possible if an NPC is in a scripted scene walking towards you. Once he exits the station and is outside up here, he takes a right and A-hops towards an alley where he'll do a pretty difficult deflection off a pallet to redirect over a fence. After saying good day and bouncing off two dudes, he heads back inside where he wall strafes up some stairs, which is where you walk into a wall at an angle, which causes you to move slightly faster. He races up these stairs after hitting a trigger to be able to beat this NPC to the radiator and jump past him, which skips a bunch of the map, along with a trigger that makes the player able to take damage, so Peng is still invincible. After climbing to the top, he'll do my typical Saturday morning by grabbing a poop bucket in the attic and heading out to the city. Instead of following the rooftops as intended, he leaps down to the streets below, immune to the triggers that would normally kill him since he's invincible. Peng is then going to set up and perform what's probably the most complicated glitch in the entire run. BBT, which is short for Bill's Big Thrill. So Peng is gonna rub this poop bucket against a tire. For some unknown reason, when you rub props against tires, they start to float. Just tires though, this only works with tires for some reason. Let's put a pin in this floating poop bucket. In the game, the player has two bounding boxes, which pretty much serve as hit boxes. One is the Havoc bounding box, and the other is the Quake bounding box. At any point in time, one of these bounding boxes has priority over the other. The box without priority constantly teleports to the box with priority as long as the box with priority is in bounds. By default, the Quake bounding box has priority, but whenever you're touching a physics object, the Havoc box has priority. So, let's get back to that floating poop bucket. Once it's floating, Peng is gonna build up some speed and jump into the bucket, with him crouching just before the final jump. This puts the player into a glitched state, which is referred to as the BBT state. Alright, pin back in the poop bucket. The BBT state is a glitched state. If you save and load during it, the game will either crash or you'll lose the glitched state. When you're in the BBT state, if you jump and then crouch, then your Havoc hitbox stays in the air and it doesn't teleport to your Quake box that has priority. As long as you stay crouched, it'll stay like this. The instant you uncrouch, the Havoc box teleports back to the Quake box. Now remember, the Havoc box takes priority whenever you touch an object, so if you set your hitbox to be in air like this, then wander over to an object and touch it, the Havoc box takes priority and you teleport to it. If, instead of the player touching an object touches the Havoc box, then the Havoc box becomes the one with priority and it begins to float. The direction that it floats is based on the stored velocity of the Havoc box, which pretty much means that it's based on how Peng was last moving. So, back to the poop bucket. Peng jumps into the floating bucket and enters the BBT state. This makes the Havoc box have priority and begin to float across the map. It floats across the map because the poop bucket, which is a physics object, touches the Havoc box. As long as the Havoc box is in bounds, the Quake box will teleport to it, which you can see by Peng moving along with the box as it travels. At one point, the box is going to go through a building and be inside a type of geometry called a brush. While this happens, Peng is stuck on the other side of the building until the Havoc box exits the brush, at which point he warps to it. When Peng does this glitch here, it's serving two purposes. First is it's giving him the BBT state, and second is it's moving him through the map to get back to the rooftop path that he diverted from when he jumped down to the road. To stop floating, all you have to do is uncrouch. Once he floats into this area with two combine guys, he'll uncrouch and run up to them. Normally they'd just attack him and begin a cutscene, but because he skipped a trigger in the previous map, he has to aggro them manually. After the cutscene plays out, he's still in the BBT state. He's going to hop back to a corner where he'll align his camera to a specific angle while facing a wall. He'll walk, jump, and crouch at the wall and stay crouched when he lands. Again, if you're in the BBT state and crouch while in air, your Havoc box stays in the air. So, by doing that lineup, he has his Havoc box set in a specific spot along that wall in the air. After setting his Havoc box to this specific spot, he's going to grab a nearby plank and use it to give the Havoc box a good old whack and send it flying across the map. This will cause Peng to go flying across the map with the box as long as the box is at a location that's considered inbounds. When he flies above this structure here, he's going to uncrouch to stop floating. The top of this structure has a solid floor that he can walk around on. And if you overlay this current map with the next one, this area is actually in bounds in the next map. Peng is going to go to a specific spot on this structure, then jump and crouch to set his Havoc box position. He'll then A-hop and platform a bit to get back in bounds to where he's supposed to be. There he'll enter an elevator cutscene with Marlene from The Last of Us. After the elevator, he'll grab a nearby pallet and look at the precise angle of -3.3, -179.7. He'll then walk forward with the pallet until his X position is within the range of -7,936.02 to 0.08. The precision down to the 10th of a single unit is important. Once he has his X position in this range, he puts the pallet down and walks into it. With this exact positioning of the pallet, he touches both the pallet to teleport to the Havoc box position and the trigger to send him to the next map in the same exact tick. This moves him to the next map and teleports him to the Havoc box position at the same time. This is important because if he enters any loading screen, the glitched state goes away. He has to make sure he teleports at the same time as entering the new map, otherwise he won't teleport in the new map correctly. The purpose of this relocation and loading into the sky on the next map is it skips him having to sit through a cutscene and saves around 7 minutes. And reminder, you have to get this all done in one try, going back to the setup with the poop bucket, because you can't save and load when you're in the glitched state. After the teleport, he'll be above the area where there's usually a cutscene and he'll platform to the end of the map. Whenever you jump and crouch in the BBT state to set up a havoc box, your speed in that moment is stored just like the box's position. Since he set up the box with a ton of speed, he has that speed again when he teleports. He'll use this speed to get to the end of the map, where he'll then prop climb by holding a prop underneath him and spamming jump and grab over and over. He'll use that to get on top of a wall where he's going to need to clear a gap. This is a really tight gap to clear, so he's going to employ 2 tactics to make sure he crosses it. The first is that he'll air strafe, which is pressing a directional key and moving the mouse in the same direction while in air, which lets you gain a bit of speed. This is super prevalent in speedruns of the first Half-Life, but this version of Half-Life 2 has a really low air acceleration value, so air strafing isn't too handy for gaining speed. The second thing he's going to use is called a toggle duck. This is a command that he has bound to do exactly what it sounds like. This is important because if you jump out of a normal crouch while moving, you lose speed when you uncrouch, but you don't lose speed if you jump and stand up out of a toggled crouch. This lets him maintain speed while gaining a little bit of height while clearing this gap. Alright, that was a lot, I understand, but let's see if he can put it all together now. So again, first he gets the poop bucket floating and jumps into it to fly across the map and initiate the BBT state. He'll bump into some Combine guys to start a cutscene where Marlene runs the back of her hand down his cheek, shushes him, and tells him everything is gonna be alright. Worth mentioning, this cutscene turns off his invincibility.
Dr. Freeman, I presume. I better hurry. The Combine can be slowed away.
He then jumps to a corner and stores his havoc box in a specific spot before touching it with a plank to send it and him flying. He uncrouches when he's above the big gray structures where he'll build up speed and store his havoc box in a specific spot before then platforming back in bounds to where he'll take that elevator ride with Marlene and try to avoid some awkward small talk.
I'm Alex Vance. My father worked with you back in Black Mesa. I'm sure you don't remember me, though. Man, a few words, aren't you?
After the ride, he grabs a pallet, angles it to around -3.3, -179.7, and moves it to an X position of -7,936.02 to 0.08.
Through here.
He bumps into it to both load into the next map and chapter while teleporting to the stored location. He then prop climbs up a building before clearing a gap with air strafing and a toggle duck, then hops on specific parts of the level with collision and bounces off the sloped surface of a barbed wire fence and Kool-Aid Man's through some boards. He save deletes as he enters the next map and chapter to be given the HEV suit and crowbar since he skipped picking those up earlier and you're intended to have those at the beginning of the chapter. Hey, wait a second! At the top of the stairs just ahead, he'll kill a Combine guy for his pistol, then line himself up with a red barrel outside. He'll shoot the barrel to explode it, launching him back into a garbage can right behind him that should hopefully angle correctly so that he slopes into the air. He then hops off a thin invisible ledge to carry momentum and drops onto a sloped pallet to avoid fall damage. He avoids looking right so a second train doesn't spawn in and block him as he goes up these stairs and jumps through the window. After grabbing a crate midair in front of himself and dropping it out of the way, Peng heads down to an oncoming train. You gain double the speed when you hop on a train moving the opposite direction as you, and he ramps off the train to fly and land on a sloped surface in the next map. After loading, he climbs up some rubble and begins to A-hop through the canal, straight to a wall that he ramps off of to cut a corner. There he grabs a crate, which he's going to use ahead to clip through some metal bars. So what I'm about to go over is really new for Half-Life 2, and it's called Item Save Glitch. Item Save Glitch, or ISG for short, is something that was discovered in Portal a long time ago, and it was just recently discovered to be possible in this game too. In short, it allows you to use objects to clip through walls. Later in the run, Peng is going to use a glitch called quickclipping, which lets him clip through walls using objects as well. When your mom says that you have quickclipping at home, Item Save Glitch is what she's talking about. Like, quickclipping is the ideal way to clip through walls using objects, but Peng can't quick clip until a later part in the game, so ISG is what he's going to use for the time being. So how does Item Save Glitch actually work, and how do you do it? This line is gonna sound really weird out of context. Remember earlier the whole poop bucket BBT thing? Well, when you do that, sometimes you're able to bump into the poop bucket in a way so that it flings to infinity. Like, it just gains a ton of speed in a direction. How much speed, you ask? How does over 140 octodecillion light years per second sound? That's 1.4 times 10 to the 59th light years per second. Anyway, getting the poop bucket to fly off like this is the first part of setting up ISG. After you do that, you then make a save in the attic that you fly to. You then progress through the route as normal until you get to this part here where Peng is at. You then make a save and load the old save that you made in the attic after making the poop bucket zip to like 3 fucking universes over. There you go over to some paint cans, maybe save load a few times along the way to prevent the game from crashing, and you then move one of the paint cans into the other. This causes the bottom paint can to nope through the floor, which activates ISG for some reason. If you save load just before touching the paint cans together, that means that you're going to have a save that you can load at any point to activate ISG. When Item Save Glitch is active, pretty much every Havoc object in the game loses collision with almost every surface. This applies to both the player's Havoc box and all props. This makes the ground look like a soupy mess with objects. Let's say you have ISG active and you're holding a prop in front of you and you then run at something like a door. If you drop the object you're holding just as you reach the door and you keep moving forward, you hit the object, causing your Havoc box to become your active box, and it carries forward through the door. Once the box reaches the other side and is fully in bounds, you warp to it. So it's handy for that, but because of the janky physics with all the objects floating around, it's not always ideal to have. You can get rid of ISG by quitting out of the game and loading back in. So despite this being something super new to the run and coming up pretty late in the production of this video, Peng still went back and recorded a new segment where he uses ISG in the run here. Earlier in the run when he did BBT, he technically didn't do the whole flinging the poop bucket beyond infinity like Buzz always wanted. But we still wanted to show off what ISG looks like in the run now, so he'll be loading a save that already did the setup with the whole infinity poop bucket. Overall, the implementation of ISG right now saves between 40 and 50 seconds. Random bit of history with ISG is that it's a developer variable that was meant as a quick fix for the Half-Life 2 demo at E3 2003. For some reason, Valve left the code that changes the variable in the retail build, and for whatever other reason, rubbing these two paint cans together under these circumstances activates ISG. So with the box, he makes a save up here and loads the save where the poop bucket is in the 8th dimension. He save loads just before touching tips, then activates ISG and loads the save he just made with the crate where he clips through these metal bars to skip a sequence where explosive barrels are thrown at you. After clambering up the slope, he slaps a barrel out of the way before save load lagging for a moment to not get picked up by a barnacle since they're all frozen from the lag. After the final save load, he presses a hotkey he has bound to close the game. He does this to get rid of ISG, and when the game launches again, he loads the final save of the barnacle skip save load to progress. The reason he wants to get rid of ISG here is because he's going to run through some tunnels in a moment where there's a bunch of props laying around. If he enters that tunnel and it loads in with ISG on, then all the props are going to float around like soup and end up with random positions and rotations. If you enter the tunnel with ISG off though, and then reactivate it after you load into the tunnel, then the props will all sit and stay in their original positions and only start floating around after you interact with them. So when he loads in, he grabs some health here before exploding a barrel in the water for a boost. On the small platform up here, he does a circle strafe to gain enough speed to clear a gap. Circle strafing is moving backwards while sprinting and strafing to a side to gain a lot of speed quickly. He immediately skips a puzzle when he enters this map and avoids fall damage when moving here by landing on slopes and having clean movement. This tunnel he enters is the one he deactivated ISG for, and just ahead is a COD Zombies window with 3 boards in it. A cutscene starts after you break a board and enter the room, and he'll grab a blue crate and make a save before loading the ISG save again and sending the pay can to hell, then loading back to where he has the blue crate. He then uses the crate to clip through this door and skip a cutscene where an NPC talks to Morgan Freeman. There's a ton of man hacks and props in the way here, but he can just throw boxes through the wall and out of the way thanks to ISG. He then grabs a barrel which he's going to Savload Clip with.
Hi, me again, sorry. So if you're stuck inside of a wall or a prop or something and you then save load, the game moves you down a little bit. If you do this while standing up, you move around 1 unit per save load, but if you do it while you're crouching, you move around 20 units at a time. So if you're stuck inside of something and then save load repeatedly, the game will slowly move you down until you clip through whatever you're stuck in and you can move around again. Side note, when you're stuck inside something, it is possible to have velocity. Normally, when something like a grenade explodes next to you, you get a boost away from the explosion. If you're stuck inside something and an explosion happens next to you, the game still applies that boost to you, but you're stuck, so you don't move. So you can be stuck inside something and still have a velocity vector. When you have a velocity like this and you then save load to save load clip, you move in the direction of that velocity. So because Peng has ISG active, it's very easy for him to just move a prop to be inside of himself, which the game considers as being stuck inside a prop. Another thing worth mentioning is that when you save load clip, the game behaves differently at different FPSs. In general, changing your FPS affects the distance you travel per save load when you have velocity, with you usually traveling farther at lower FPSs. Unrelated to that, when you're save load clipping and are entering back in bounds, the game sort of pushes you the final distance out of the wall. Changing your FPS affects the distance the game pushes you out of the wall when you're entering back in bounds, but again, that's unrelated to the velocity change at different FPSs. So, right now, Peng has that explosive barrel he picked up. He's going to place it inside himself and then save load once to move down a little bit and get himself stuck in the ground. He's then going to place the barrel next to himself and blow it up. This will boost him opposite where the barrel was and give him a ton of velocity in that direction. So when he then save loads, he'll clip in that direction. He's going to do this to clip into a different part of the level. Again, he places the barrel in himself, save loads to clip down, places the barrel next to himself, and blows it up to get velocity in that direction. He clips into this area where he heads to the end of the pipe for more of a runway and builds up speed to ramp off a hill here and fly over some really tall invisible walls. He grabs a super conveniently placed barrel here and carries it across this area to a specific spot where he's going to place it inside himself and save load clip straight down. He lowers his FPS to 30 for this clip so that at the bottom he gets pushed farther out of the wall and doesn't get stuck in some metal bars. As soon as he's done the final save load for the clip, he again quits out of the game to get rid of ISG and loads back in to be where he ended up. He's then going to do a save delete as soon as he enters the next map up here to top off on health, since 40 is a pretty low number to be at right now. So he'll hang a left up here and go down a hallway with 3 boxes in it where the game can just crash for seemingly no reason. He's then going to make his way outside, trying to move in a pretty specific way to avoid stubbing his toe on a head crab. After navigating the tight corridors here, he's going to grab a barrel and use it to prop climb and skip part of this area before then beginning to A-hop through the canals. He's going to skip driving the slow as hell airboat here by just tanking the green goo's damage and taking a shortcut by ramping to fly to the crank he's supposed to crank up the crank's gate. Instead of cranking the crank, he grabs a box, saves, and loads the ISG setup save to start it back up, then loads back and puts the box inside himself so he can save load clip down into the next map. He does this clip at 30 FPS as well to make sure he fully comes out of the gate. As soon as he's made the final save for the save load chain, he quits out and loads back in to continue into one of the hardest chapters of the run, Water Hazard. After launching up to the G-Man to say what up, he reloads the level to do it proper and will build up speed before ramping off a bump to go flying above the map and skip a large portion of it. He's then going to perform the second most complicated glitch of the run, Yesclip. As soon as he finishes flying down here, he'll hit the trigger to enter the next map and he'll do a save delete right after. Because save deletes act as if you're loading the map through the console, an airboat spawns at the start of the map right next to him. He's then going to drive the airboat straight forward until his X coordinate is between 8200 and 8225, which is just at the edge of a change level trigger. Pin in the airboat. When you load into a new map, the game doesn't want to keep everything loaded in from the previous map, since that'd lead to memory issues. Instead, there are giant transition trigger boxes at the end of levels. When you enter the next map, everything inside of the transition trigger stays loaded in. The transition trigger at the airboat is pretty big. This is what it looks like, but as you can see over here, it doesn't extend all the way out to cover this side area. So back to the airboat. The spot where Peng positions it is at the edge of the change level trigger just outside of it. This means if he's standing behind the airboat, he's in the previous level. When you interact to sit in the boat, the game instantly teleports you to the seat but plays a sitting down animation with the camera. Doing this to teleport past the change level trigger and sit in the boat is called clipping, and it skips the trigger, so he stays in the old map despite it looking like he moved through the trigger. He'll then rotate the airboat and back it up so that it ramps up a rock face, which puts it outside of the transition trigger. Peng will then press the button to exit the airboat while holding A. Holding A immediately places him in the change level trigger, which instantly causes the next level to load, and since the airboat isn't in the transition trigger, it gets deleted. It takes a moment to exit the airboat though, meaning that Peng will still be in the airboat when it gets deleted. Being in a vehicle when it gets deleted is the Yesclip glitch, which puts the player in what's referred to as the Yesclip state. The Yesclip state has two important properties. The first being that the player then has no clip. You can pretty much just fly through everything. The second property is that the player, and by proxy the Havoc bounding box, get moved to a special collision group where the Havoc box doesn't collide with anything. Reminder that the Havoc box only has priority when the player is touching an object. This will be important in a moment. After performing Yesclip and having no clip, Peng is going to fly through an out of bounds stretch to a building where he'll grab an SMG grenade, regular nades, along with some armor, followed by breaking some boxes outside for more armor. He'll then fly out of bounds across the map to a barnacle that he's gonna French. When you fly into a barnacle in the Yesclip state, the no clip property is removed and the barnacle drops you, but the Havoc box not having collision remains. Because the Havoc box only has priority when you're touching physics objects though, it doesn't really affect you too much moment to moment. So again, Peng save deletes to spawn the airboat, then positions it so his X coordinate is in the range of 8200 to 8225. He then gets out, walks back to load into the previous map, and re-enters the boat through the change level trigger. He rotates the airboat and backs it up the slope to get it out of the transition trigger, then exits the airboat to load the next map and delete the airboat, giving him the Yesclip state where he has no clip and the Havoc box doesn't have collision. He flies through out of bounds to get some nades and armor from the building, then gets more armor from a box outside before flying out of bounds again to skip a lot of the map en route to a barnacle. After removing no clip, he does a circle strafe to start A-hopping and begins a super movement heavy stretch of the run. This chapter of the run is one of the 3 hardest in the game just due to nailing down this movement. He's of course constantly trying to keep his speed up, but is also trying to constantly be landing on slopes or in water to avoid taking fall damage. It's thanks to the fact that there's so much water to land in that this chapter is only top 3 hardest and not top 2, or maybe even top 1 hardest. Man, if only there were some easy way to say top 1 hardest. While Peng blazes a trail, I'd just like to say real quick, as always, that I hope you're all doing well. If you're not, then please remember, as always, that there is a tomorrow and that no feeling is final. No matter what's going on, what's looming over your head, it cannot take away the fact that there is a tomorrow. Whatever feelings of despair or dread you're experiencing, one day will pass. You might not notice it at first, and it might not happen all at once, but one day you'll be able to reflect back to this moment and think, that's where I was, not who I was or am. We're all human. No one is immune to difficult times. Please reach out and talk to others if you're having a hard time right now.
Back to the run, whenever he's going through these concrete pipes and culverts, he's trying to ride the walls to avoid hitting the ground with too much speed and taking fall damage, while also avoiding the radioactive jizz and redirecting his velocity. He's then going to get on an elevator that has a barrel on it. Reminder, he had the Yesclip state recently, which gave him no clip, along with the Havoc bounding box not having collision, but removed the no clip by pole dancing a barnacle's tongue, but the Havoc box still doesn't have collision. Just having the Havoc box property is called the quick clip state, since it allows him to do quick clips, that thing I mentioned earlier. He grabs this barrel and presses up against it by jumping into a fence. Touching the barrel gives the Havoc box priority, and the Havoc box carries forward with his momentum from jumping, so the instant it's inbounds on the other side of the fence, he teleports to its location, completing the quick clip. It's really similar to clipping with ISG, except more consistent. Peng quick clips with this drum here, with the nearby Vortigaunt ignoring him because Peng didn't arrive by airboat, and the Vortigaunt really likes airboats. After clipping through another fence with another barrel, he's going to stop in a specific part of the wall ahead to set up chili launch. He begins his jumps there with specific timing so that when he gains a ton of speed on the left ahead, the helicopter doesn't block him when he launches off the slope to go flying through and over the map. He lands on a slope here and then in the goo ahead to avoid fall damage, and he'll then A-hop to the next map, which is a super hard and inconsistent one. Again, because he's moving so fast, he's trying to land specifically on slopes or in water to avoid taking fall damage. After stopping by the G-Man again so that this time you guys can say hi to him in the comments, he's going to reload the level and do it proper. So when Peng enters the Black Mesa East map up here, he's going to quick clip, followed by doing 2 save load clips. First, he puts a barrel inside himself and save loads multiple times to travel down to a bunk room. There he'll grab a bed frame and move to a specific spot in the room where he'll again save load clip straight down, with this clip requiring him to do 70 save loads to travel the full distance. This will put him in a server room or something where he hits a trigger for a cutscene before quick clipping out of the room to hit another trigger and start the cutscene. This cutscene involves Rafiki from The Lion King, and it's a really long one, but Peng will speed it up by doing some funky stuff. The funky stuff that he's going to do was actually just discovered while we were working on this video and is the biggest time save found for this game in 4 years, saving around 2 minutes. The main tech that he'll use to break this cutscene is called a slap, which is short for save load and pause. Pretty much it's when you save load and then pause before the game fully loads, and you can chain together multiple of them. When he gets to the cutscene area, Peng moves a barrel by a door, then looks at some lore on the wall, which causes Rafiki to start following him for a short span of time. Rafiki is supposed to stop following you pretty quickly, but by slapping repeatedly, Peng continually interrupts Rafiki's attempts to stop following him, so he just keeps following. So here is Peng looking at the lore to get Rafiki to start following him, and he then quick clips through the door with the barrel. He then slaps to interrupt Rafiki's attempts to stop following him. Rafiki decides that earthly constructs such as doors no longer hold meaning for him, since he follows Peng through the door and hits a trigger just past the door. This activates a trigger Peng is standing in, which causes Marlene to start her part of the cutscene. Getting back in the room is tough though, since there's no item to clip with, so Peng does an NPC clip. Normally if an NPC walks into you, you get pushed out of them, but by save loading as they touch you and before you start getting pushed out of them, you get stuck in each other. While stuck, Peng uses a grenade to redirect his velocity to be in the direction of the door, then save load clips through the door with that velocity. There's a specific timing to when you do this save load clip. Too soon and Marlene starts unwanted dialogue, too late and the game soft locks. Now that Marlene is active, she makes her grand entrance to the cutscene, but due to the specific trigger that was hit, she thinks she's supposed to be making her way to somewhere way later in the cutscene. So she just starts moonwalking that direction after Peng teleports her a couple times. Up ahead, Peng will line up just before a doorway and specifically move just behind Marlene as she passes through that area, since there's a series of triggers that he has to hit with a specific timing.
That's the old passage to Ravenholm.
Marlene talks about how the hallway that Peng places a barrel in is the old passage to Ravenholm and how they don't go there anymore. Peng slaps some more to prevent Marlene from turning and heading back to the main cutscene room, and at the top of the ramp he teleports her, which fully moves her to the keypad for the elevator to leave the map. He'll then circle strafe and exit the elevator before the invisible wall spawns, with the next map loading when the doors close, and he directly disrespects Marlene by heading down the old passage to Ravenholm, using the barrel to quick clip through a door and skip a cutscene. He's making his way to a ladder, quick clipping through props along the path since they're in the way, and after hitting open the ladder cage, he ladder speeds up. This is when you spam jump and crouch to climb slightly faster. Outside, he's going to shoot while A-hopping, which is actually pretty tricky to get down. Then we'll quick clip through a few walls into a small courtyard. There he'll throw and grab a nade, line himself up in a specific spot with a stain on the wall, and use the nade to do a precise launch off a slope to get on a roof. He platforms up here to reach the end of the map, where he heads inside. There he moves a barrel to a corner, does a quick clip on it, and heads into a building across the way where he does a quick clip next to a crawly guy to make it to the end of this map. Outside, he puts a grenade on the ground and lines himself up with it. At almost the same time it explodes, he fires an SMG nade to get a double boost over the entire map, skipping a map that he's not even going to enter. He then heads into a rock corridor and sets up ravioli launch. This is where he lines himself up with a specific texture on the rock and starts a nade boost. Right before the nade explodes, he walks backwards and jumps and gets a huge boost where he weaves around invisible walls. When Peng heads inside, he's going to drop down a hole into Blighttown. Whenever you get stuck between a slope and a wall, the game doesn't consider you as on the ground, but it still reduces your fall speed, so he uses the slopes and walls of the hole to reduce fall damage. He does a small circle strafe after landing and ramps off these stairs ahead before dropping down by some head crabs. Head crabs are super annoying when you have the quick clip state because they can just walk inside of you, and when they're inside of you, you can't move at all. Just past the head crabs is this shaft that Peng needs to drop down. This is the shaft, and as you can see right here, there's a tunnel that runs alongside and near the shaft. This tunnel is a later part of the level, and Peng is going to try to skip to it with beam clip. The shaft has some wood support beams, and some of them are considered physics objects. If an object isn't moving and then you, the player, slide on top of the object, your bounding box moves in a specific way. In this specific spot, if Peng slides on top of the beam, his bounding box will carry with his horizontal momentum, but also be subject to gravity and drop down, right into the neighboring tunnel where he'll teleport to since the Havoc box is back in bounds. Despite this clip crossing the void, it's not a void clip because remember from the intro, void clipping is when you utilize tick perfect saving and loading to maintain horizontal velocity while you're out of bounds in the void. So again, to do this beam clip, Peng needs to slide across the top of the beam so that his Havoc box behaves in this specific way. To do this consistently requires setup. Peng is going to walk into a corner so his position is consistent run to run, and then look at the right corner of the bloodstain across the shaft. Something bloodstain across my shaft. He'll then sprint, jump, and strafe right to land on the beam and slide on it. If done correctly, his bounding box will carry forward and he'll clip into the other tunnel. Peng tosses a nade and grabs it before using it to launch backwards up a giant slope that you normally can't jump on when moving. This circumvents him sprinting up the slope super slowly. At the top, he'll enter a new map and head outside where he's going to A-hop, but intentionally not go as fast as possible. He needs to quick clip through a box up ahead, and if you're going too fast and try to quick clip, you just get stopped in your place due to your Havoc box glitching out a bit when moving too fast. Thanks to Soccer Moms being prepared, he grabs a medkit from the back of this van, then uses this pallet to clip through a fence. He grabs an SMG nade, then clips into this building with a barrel. Inside, he does another quick clip with a table, which puts him in a room with a cutscene, but he skips the cutscene by clipping into the next room with a box. When he heads outside, he enters Highway 17, the most movement-heavy chapter of the game. There's not a whole lot to explain here, it's just pure movement. Again, Peng avoids fall damage largely by landing on sloped surfaces, with the entire chapter being able to be beaten in around 45 seconds. I'm sure you've reasoned by now, but it's worth pointing out that in Half-Life 2, there's really no way to do major sequence breaks to skip from one chapter to another. Speedrunners pretty much focus on physically getting to the end of each individual chapter as fast as possible, as Peng is doing here.
Minor fracture detected.
Instead of going under a bridge into a separate map, Peng launches over the bridge to fly to a tunnel that leads to the next chapter, Sandtraps, where the insane movement continues for a bit. Just ahead, Peng will slide down a steep rocky slope before entering one of the top 5 hardest maps in the game. He's going to ramp himself up on top of the surrounding terrain and then navigate on a bunch of invisible floors and surfaces by trees. Thing is though, there's also some holes in the invisible floor that you can fall through, so you have to be super careful with your movement in this area. Peng is going to drop down ahead and cancel fall damage in a different way. Other than props, most geometry in the game is either made up of brushes or displacements. Displacements are typically what's used for bumpy ground or terrain, and only one side of them is fully visible and solid. The other side of displacements are pretty glitched. Peng has his flashlight on to better see the shadow of a displacement below, and falls on it to mess with his movement and zero his velocity, avoiding fall damage. He lands next to the map exit, but has to turn around and hit the change level trigger a little back in the level so the next map loads. Outside, he builds up a ton of speed, and after he skips on top of water like a rock thrown by Andrew Garfield, he'll boost with an SMG nade and redirect off a rock pillar to hole-in-one into a giant pipe. This brings him to the prison named Nova Prospekt, which is also the upcoming chapter's name, where Morgan Freeman is supposed to be rescuing Rafiki. After he bounces off a wall to reach a spot with 2 boxes, he's going to do what he refers to as probably the second most annoying clip in the game. He needs to stand on top of a box while quickclipping with another box, but since his Havoc box is already dominant when he's touching the prop beneath him, the collision can be super buggy here, but of course he just nails it. A timer starts as soon as he's in this area, with the next map loading at the end of the timer, so he takes the moment to top off on nades and moves a barrel to the corner before circle strafing and quick clipping into the next map. He clips through some bars with a chair before picking up a pulse rifle and using a barrel to reach the floor above. Like I mentioned during Highway 17, he's mainly trying to get to the end of the chapter, clipping through every wall that gets him there sooner. After the filing cabinet clip, he's going to clip with a box up ahead past some turrets, then do a nade boost over a blue barricade. This brings him down to 12 HP, but he picks up some more health from boxes to get that back up. He's going to do another boost at the top of the stairs around the corner, but this one's a double boost with him standing next to a trip mine, which he explodes with a nade, giving him a boost from both explosions. After clipping with a box here, Peng will clip with a fence that's against a wall. Remember, you can only quick clip with physics objects, but this fence is considered one. Ahead, he'll enter a small dark corridor with 2 turrets in front of some prison bars. Peng is going to clip through the bars by jumping into the left turret, but specifically aim to clip through the tripod of the turret and not the top, since the tripod is wide enough and the top isn't. If you hit the turret's upper half, you won't clip through the bars consistently, so he has to hit the turret on its lower half as he's falling down to clip, in addition to having enough speed to make the clip. He pizza tosses this box so he can sprint momentarily before doing a clip with it, and breaks a box on the other side for armor and an SMG nade. As he crawls through the Berlin Wall, Peng is going to grab a crate and bring it with him to the next chapter, Entanglement. He'll toss his box up onto the floor above him so it's a safe distance away and doesn't break when he nade boosts up to it, and he's then going to prop climb with it to get to an area that looks like it's out of bounds but in reality is still inbounds. Peng will then move forward a little bit before dragging the box into himself and doing a Savload clip to go straight down to an area that he isn't supposed to be in until much later. This clip, combined with all the other clips that he's going to do in this map, skip around 5 minutes of cutscenes. He'll go upstairs ahead and do a clip with a chair, which utilizes a piece of tech called a drop strat. When you quick clip, you can often get stuck on a prop, especially when moving at high speeds. If you drop the prop just before clipping through it though, your speed is largely preserved and the clip happens smoothly. It's used a few times in the run, such as here. After using this poop bucket to clip through bars, he's going to do a relatively precise clip by approaching the barrels in the dark here at a specific angle to fling his Havoc box forward correctly. Up ahead, he's going to enter a control room where he's going to break a box to grab 2 SMG nades and an energy ball for the pulse rifle. He circle strafes to gain velocity and heads around a corner ahead where he Savload clips down to a room below, which skips Marlene, who's waiting for him.
After schmoving through the next room, he tries to avoid touching a doorway on the left that's technically a physics prop, but bumps into it with no consequences, breaks a box for armor, and quick clips to a stairwell. At the top of the stairs is one of the hardest clips in the game. There's this doorway here that's blocked by a few boxes. Normally you're supposed to break the boxes to get by, but instead he's going to try and do a ridiculously hard clip to cut the corner and skip them. He's going to use the nearby big box to quick clip, but if he hits it with too much angle to the right, he'll get stuck between the prop and the doorway. If he clips with too much angle to the left, his havoc box will just be sent out into the void and never go back in bounds. In total, this clip saves 2 to 3 seconds over breaking the boxes. A little after this clip, he's going to Savload Clip himself into the ground, then blow up a nade right next to himself to redirect his velocity. Remember, when you redirect your velocity while stuck and then Savload, you travel in the direction of your velocity plus the default 20 units down, so he needs enough upwards velocity to fight the 20 unit down pull. So he's going to do this and then Savload 5 times to clip into a small locker containing a turret that he's going to grab. He'll then do another Savload, which moves him out of the locker. So why clip next to the turret and grab it? Well, in order to enter the next map, there are 3 cutscenes that need to play out. Let's refer to them as cutscenes A, B, and C. Normally, you progress through the area and cutscene A plays out, followed by cutscene B. After cutscene B is a tower defense segment with the turrets, then cutscene C. At the end of cutscene C, you ride an elevator/teleporter up into the trigger for the next map. Sitting through all 4 of these sections is pretty slow, but if you're able to pick up the 2 turrets in these locker storage things, the tower defense segment immediately starts. The first of the 2 turrets he picks up right after the clip, but the second one is locked inside the other locker. Valve wanted people to be able to interact with NPCs through see-through objects like fences, so they coded into the game that if an NPC is friendly to the player and the only thing between the player and NPC is an object like a fence, then the player is allowed to interact with the NPC. The turret in this other locker is technically an NPC and friendly to the player, so you'd think that you could just interact with it through the translucent blue barrier. Only problem is that Valve thought of that, and you can't interact with the turret through the barrier. Thankfully though, there's a glass panel right next to the locker, and if you look at the corner of the locker through the glass, you can interact with the turret. So by Savload clipping into the locker thing and interacting with the turret, then interacting with the other turret through the glass, we jump straight to the tower defense section. Doing this essentially takes cutscene B out of the equation. Don't need to worry about it, don't need to factor it in. Out of sight, out of mind. But upon entering this area, cutscene A starts playing at the same time as the tower defense segment. In order to leave this area and get to the next map, you need to get to the end of cutscene C. Cutscene C normally starts playing after the tower defense section, but it'll also start playing a fixed amount of time after the tower defense segment begins. So Peng will start the tower defense part, and eventually cutscene C will start playing. And when cutscene C ends, he can go to the next map. But there's a second requirement to get to the next map. Cutscene A has to end at a very specific time, otherwise the game will soft lock. If cutscene A never finishes, or it finishes too early, or it finishes too late, then the game completely soft locks. And on top of it, when he enters the area and grabs the turret to start cutscene A in the tower defense section, 3 comp guys SWAT team through the wall. He does have a solution to this all though, but let's get back to the run and cover it during the cutscene section itself. So again, he does one of the hardest clips in the game up here to skip breaking the boxes. He then breaks a box for some armor and clips through bars with one of the boxes he circumvented and clips down a floor here by falling into the box. Around the corner ahead, he says sup to a comm guy before grabbing a bench and doing a Savload clip to get himself stuck in the ground. He uses a nade to redirect his momentum, Savloads 5 times to clip into the turret locker, grabs the turret, and Savloads again to escape the locker like how I wish I could have in high school. He then interacts with the other turret through the corner of the glass to start cutscene A and the tower defense section. One of the pieces of debris that flies into the room has collision, but just one of them does. Peng grabs this chunk of drywall, orients it to a really steep angle, and places it in a precise spot. This basically blocks a node on the ground that allows cutscene A to progress and freezes the cutscene in place. He's going to move the drywall at a specific moment later on to resume cutscene A so that it ends at the correct time and the game doesn't soft lock. So he took out 2 of the 3 comb guys, which something I failed to mention so far is that bullets don't affect you when you have the quick clip state. They just pass through you, so he's immune to their shots. He only killed 2 of the 3 comb guys because if he killed all 3, then waves of them would spawn for the tower defense, which he doesn't want to happen. He also hangs to the back side of the room where they came in because the comb guy can follow him out of this area and kill either of the cutscene NPCs and soft lock the game. While the cutscenes play out, you can actually see the teleporter moving up when it's supposed to move down right now. It broke with the turret stuff. Marlene is also supposed to be here right now too, but the game just doesn't care. Just in general, cutscene broken. Peng is mostly going to wait and watch the teleporter as it rises, and after he sees it blink red twice, that's when he'll go move the debris to resume cutscene A so that it ends at the proper time and the game doesn't soft lock. As Peng waits for this to play out, real quick, big thank you to my patrons for not only supporting the channel, but for voting for this run to be covered on the channel. Everyone who supports the channel on Patreon gets to participate in polls to suggest and vote on future runs to be covered, with pretty much every other video being chosen this way. For as little as $3 a month, you also get access to videos early, your name in these credits, and updates on what videos are being made right now. If you support at some of the higher tiers, you can also get access to monthly retrospectives where I break down older videos of mine and talk about what they do and don't do well, monthly live Q&As, and a monthly behind the scenes recap podcast thingy. Speaking of those monthly retrospectives though, I originally set out with the intention of releasing them publicly 1 year after they've been exclusive to Patreon. Well, it's been 1 year now since I started doing them, so you can now start catching the ones from last year as they're uploaded monthly on my Tomato Angus channel. And speaking of other channels, I've started up a VOD channel to upload all my stream VODs to, along with a bunch of random VODs from 2020 and 2021 that I had saved. Links to both the Tomato Angus and Angus On Demand channels are featured on this channel's page. But I digress. Thank you so much to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon and makes these videos possible. I truly appreciate you. Back to the run, when the cutscenes finish and the teleporter makes it to the top, the teleporter moves back down to the bottom super quick. Peng tops off on his health and armor, and then we'll head over to the teleporter/elevator, which doesn't care that Marlene isn't in it with him. So because in a way Peng doesn't have collision with physics objects, when the elevator starts moving up, it'll move up without him. To counter this, he's going to boost with an SMG nade to give himself upward velocity, and since he's inside the elevator, he's stuck and is given the velocity from the boost but doesn't move. He then save loads 30 times to Savload Clip up to the top of the elevator shaft, which is where the trigger for the next map is. Similar to some of the earlier clips, Peng lowers his FPS to 30 here. Because he doesn't have the gravity gun, when he loads into the next map, he shoots the energy ball he picked up earlier to move a large prop to clip out of the room and skip a 15-second cutscene before using a box to clip into an elevator shaft to enter the next chapter. Outside, he looks above an X in the crossbeams here and throws a nade, then grabs a crate and moves onto the nade before walking forward and jumping to boost and slope off the top of a fence and clear over some invisible collision he couldn't pass. He'll then drop strat again to clip through a wall, with the drop strat being the only viable way to clip through the wall quickly, saving around 4 seconds. After transitioning to the next map, he's going to circle strafe outside to start A-hopping, and after ramping himself into an alley area ahead, he'll throw a grenade up some stairs and swap to the shotgun right before entering the next map transition. If you throw the nade before the change level trigger, the game will throw a second nade, but swapping to the shotgun prevents that. He uses the nade to boost over a fence before then navigating through the streets. He has over 70 HP and armor combined, which is good because he's going to do another double boost ahead. He'll put a nade into a corner and look at a specific place in the texture on the wall, then begin moving backwards and shoot an SMG nade for the double boost. He uses a slope for extra height before then jumping off an invisible surface to barely reach this door. Inside, he does a save load clip with at least 30 save loads to go down a floor and skip taking the stairs because stairs slow. Once the save loading is done, he grabs an SMG nade from a box and enters the next map, where he circle strafes and A-hops a bit before jumping over a fence into a door instead of taking the long way through a different door to enter the fenced area.
He shoots and jumps through some glass to enter the next tunnel stretch where he'll throw a box through some rebar that doesn't have collision with props, then grab another box and quick clip through the obstruction with it. He grabs the first box he threw and uses it to clip through a door that's currently locked, but Peng was kind enough to open it from the other side for the NPC. He didn't have to do that. Peng is just a really nice guy. Up these stairs and outside, he'll grab everything inside a van and do a very specific hop pattern of sprinting, jumping, strafing left, toggle duck, jump, and clip through the gate. Then toggle duck and jump into the trash can to hit some weird collision in it that gives upward velocity so he can fly above the map. He then tries to clip through this gate with the crate, but I guess fate hates my mate since he has to aberrate and abdicate the crate and operate with a garbage can. Peng chose to leave in that failed clip to show off just how random clipping can be at times. In here, he'll grab some nades before doing a Savload clip in a specific spot that's above a door frame the floor below him. When he clips down into the floor below him, he's still inside of collision with being inside the door frame, which allows him to keep going down and clip straight to 2 floors down. When he goes outside, he does a nade boost that requires him to time his jump as the nade explodes, otherwise he won't get enough height for the boost. Up ahead, he'll go into a tunnel underground and quick clip through a door since the door is a physics prop, meaning he can just jump through it. He save loads after the clip because there's an unproven belief among runners that it makes clipping through this second door easier. Peng grabs the star of the movie Rubber and does a clip before shooting a box out of the way and using a pipe to reduce fall damage. After killing this comb guy here, he gets out a nade in preparation for the second biggest run killer, which is an insanely hard grenade boost. He'll get into a corner and use plus strafe to move very slightly backwards and jump onto a railing. Then look at a specific spot on the grenade and as far left as possible without the nade moving away. Right before the nade explodes, he'll start moving backwards and jump to get a huge boost up to a ladder. This setup is very precise and very hard to be consistent with. At the top, he does a circle strafe and nade boost to hit a trigger on a catwalk before dropping down and entering the door the trigger unlocks. The whole run, he's been preserving shotgun shells so that right here he won't be too low on them and picks them up from this box instead of an SMG nade. Peng A-hops through the street and uncrouches above a slope here for extra height to fly to the map's end where he lands on a slope for no fall damage. In the next map, he's going to do a very specific boost. First, he'll grab a turret before awkwardly waggling it over some comb guy and placing it in a corner. He's then going to use plus strafe to align himself in an exact spot on the floor's texture, specifically a spot on the edge of a line, then places his crosshair on a dot on the wall. He then save loads and while the game is loading, shoots an SMG nade and jumps at the same time. Pressing these inputs during the load makes them both happen on the same exact tick after the load. This launches him back into the turret and clips him through the wall before ramping off a tiny slope and progressing through to the next map. He uses his shotty here to break a power connector to enter the next map where he's going to throw and pick up a nade. Peng is going to hit a trip laser to activate a floor turret that he's going to stand on, but because he has quick clip, then he goes inside the turret when it raises. The nade then blows up and gives him velocity through the wall, so by save loading, he clips through. On the other side, he grabs a crate and clips through a barrier with it using a drop strat. After clipping, he avoids trip mines and holds E while throwing a box to do a super throw and throw it farther to avoid the mines. Peng picks up an RPG on the other side of the wall, which he's going to use to intimidate a couple comb guys at the top of these stairs to make them move out of the way. Back outside, he'll use the RPG to boost over stuff, with RPG boosts requiring a bit tricky timing since RPGs travel slowly. He breaks some crates here for health and nades before looking roughly in the middle of a vent, beginning to run backwards and doing an SMG boost to get over a fence and clear this giant gap. He then drops down several floors here to reach the next map, with there being no real way to cancel fall damage here. And before you ask, the stairs aren't a steep enough slope to cancel the fall damage. Back outside, he's going to begin A-hopping before doing an SMG boost and ramping off an upturned tank thingy for extra height. When he goes down the stairs here, he grabs a bunch of health from all these crates, then goes out on a road where he circle strafes and A-hops to launch off a dumpster. He empties a box for more rockets and uses one to get ammo and armor from some crates before dropping down into the next map.
He rockets some planks and says "excuse me" to a rebel to squeak by, then RPG boosts and ramps before quick clipping with a box. He grabs a trash can on the other side, which he's going to use to clip under the big combine wall on the edge of the area. Remember that his Havoc box travels with gravity, so he uses it to clip into a tunnel underground where he heads into the penultimate chapter. He does a save delete right as he enters the chapter, which gives him the gravity gun, which will be important in a moment, but also it gets rid of his quick clip state.
So as you can tell by what Peng has named this chapter, it's not a nice chapter. To start, you're supposed to go around the level to go down a bit, but instead, Peng is going to drop down and bounce off a tiny slope to cancel fall damage and land on a ledge. After platforming a bit, he's going to begin to do Citadel O2 skip. This is a big one. So normally in this level, you have to ride in a prisoner pod that'll transport you all the way to the end. Instead of riding the pod in this map, he's first going to do an RPG boost to land on a floor at the entrance to the next map. Normally you enter the next map while in a pod, and you start the next map while in a pod. Even if you skip the pod in the first map like how Peng will do and then walk into the next map, you will be in a pod when you load in. Or at least that's what's supposed to happen. So in the map transition spot that Peng will boost to, there are two triggers. One trigger will make the screen fade to white. This trigger is pretty big and covers the entire cross section of this area. The second trigger is the one that moves you to the next map. This trigger is behind that big first fade to white trigger, but it's also up near the ceiling. Peng naturally wants to hit this trigger to progress through the game, but it's too high for him to just jump up and hit, so he needs to nade boost to it. That'll cause him to load into the next map, but again, when you load into the next map, you'll be in a pod, even if you weren't in one in the previous map. But it turns out, if you're holding a prop when you transition into this next map, you will not be placed into a pod. So what Peng is going to go for is a nade boost into the trigger while holding a prop with the gravity gun. After boosting over to the ledge, he's going to grab a scanner that's flying by and then move into position with it. He'll turn the scanner loose for just a moment while he places a grenade right at the ledge. He's then going to grab the scanner again and try to boost up into the trigger. Thing is though, scanners are fragile as fuck, so if he's too close to the nade when it explodes, then the scanner's gonna break and he won't be holding a prop when he loads into the next map, so he'll be placed into a pod. To try and space out the boost correctly, after placing the nade, Peng is going to re-grab the scanner and walk forward through the fade to white trigger onto this specific line on the ground. By then jumping without moving just before the grenade explodes, he'll get a slight launch forward into the transition trigger. This will load him into the next map where it turns out you actually load in on a platform. It doesn't end there, because the thing is, he actually has another issue to deal with here. See, just like how it turns out you spawn on a platform, the prisoner pods actually spawn on the side of the platform. When the game finishes loading everything, it runs some map logic that moves the prisoner pods onto the rail overhead. Well, we don't want the pods to move over because that's gonna block Peng from doing something. To prevent the pods from moving over, Peng is going to do a first tick save load. This is when he does a save load before the map fully loads in, which is actually possible to do. This causes some logic that's supposed to fire when the map loads, such as moving the pods to the rail, to not fire. So to summarize this all, he's going to do a precise boost into the map transition while holding a scanner to avoid being put in a pod, and then do a first tick save load to prevent the pods from moving onto the rail. But there's more after this, because this was all just set up for the part of Citadel O2 skip that's the single hardest skip in the entire game. This part of Citadel O2 skip is pretty much entirely movement based, and since it's the hardest part of the run, it's also the biggest choke point for runners. Nothing like having something crazy hard right before the end of the game, right? So upon entering the Citadel O2 map and doing the first tick save load, Peng is going to do 2 more save loads to remove the fade from white. He'll begin this part by circle strafing and then trying to do a very hard RPG boost. It's so hard that Peng isn't sure if there's any runners who can consistently do it, himself included. If he does the RPG boost correctly, he'll have just barely enough height to reach this platform and touch the slope on the edge to not take any fall damage. If done correctly, he'll be launched forward here at high speeds. He'll use this speed to ramp off some geometry and an air strafe to reach a ledge up on the right. He would then try to do the same thing on that ledge as the one before, using it as a spot to gain speed before ramping off geometry to reach another ledge. This ledge is then just a straight shot to one right in front of it that he'll try to reach. If he makes it there, he'll stop to reset his hop pattern to begin from a consistent spot and do 3 hops with specific spacing before ramping to the left, where he'd ramp back to the right with hopefully enough height to land on the glass platform area. He'll again try to bounce off a slope to reach a ledge, but because his velocity is at the lowest at this part of the skip, that makes it even harder to get enough height. If he's able to get enough height and strafe around to this ledge on the left, he's going to try and get enough speed and height to make it onto some train tracks that are way up here. This is really hard though. Even if you're traveling at max velocity and you hit a slope, you don't get enough height to reach the tracks. Instead, what Peng will have to do is convert both his x-axis and y-axis velocities into z-axis velocities by hitting 2 different slopes. Hitting just one slope, even if he's traveling at max speed, doesn't give him enough z-axis velocity. Gotta hit 2 slopes. Even then, he'll still have to do an SMG boost to barely reach the tracks. From there, he'd just do a circle strafe and ramp off a slope to be able to reach the end of the map. So, I know that was a lot, and if it's that hard to follow as a viewer with diagrams, just imagine how hard it is for a runner to do all of this and hit it all perfectly along the way. The only thing that Citadel O2 skip has going for it is that runners can make saves along the way and reload them if something goes wrong, so that makes it a bit more tolerable, I guess. In total, everything I covered in this pause section combined saves close to 2 minutes and 40 seconds, so it's a huge, difficult time save right before the end of the run. But anyway, let's see this entire section play out and see if Peng can hit this all first try without having to load any saves. So there's a trigger in the next map up here that strips away your weapons, but that trigger doesn't cover the entire room. By standing next to the edge of the room, Peng can just pick his weapons back up after they fly out, with the cutscene ending faster if you pick up more weapons. He has to wait until the lasers start touching the grav gun before grabbing it, else the game will soft lock or crash, and he can then progress on after yoinking it. He'll make a quick pit stop ahead to top off his health and armor at what's pretty much a supercharger before then doing an RPG boost to skip around the outside of an area. After hitting this dude into a wall like he was sitting on an airbag, he'll enter an elevator here. At the top, he'll quickly use the grav gun to grab an orb from a container to power down a barrier that's blocking him. He'll then grab another orb around this corner without stopping moving and holds E to get a little health and armor from another supercharger as he does a drive-by. In this room, he'll do a skip called Orb Launch, which isn't very consistent, but usually works. He gets in this corner and zooms to look at the middle of a line on a monitor and grabs it with the grav gun before then moving it in front of him until its shadow on the railing to the left is somewhere between the black and blue lines. He drops the monitor, takes an orb, jumps, and shoots the orb in a specific spot to give the orb a ton of velocity, which then transfers into him and launches him up with a speed of around 2,000 units per second. Peng then makes his way to the next map, doing an SMG boost along the way and having to remove a few orbs ahead to remove a barrier so he can progress. When he loads into the next map, he's supposed to go left and press E to enter a pod that he rides to the final scene. Instead, he does one final SMG boost to reach a pod farther ahead on the rail and presses E on it to skip around 20 seconds of waiting by cutting in line. This is pretty much where runners consider the run to be over, and where they'll usually have their reaction or pop off if they're on PB pace, but there is still some tech ahead to explain.
While Peng rides to the final encounter, and before I explain the tech, I just want to say thank you on behalf of both myself and Peng for watching this video. But most importantly, I want to give an enormous thank you to Peng for helping make this video. This video took a lot to make. I mean, as you just saw, it's a really dense run for its length. Not only did Peng re-record large segments of the run to keep the video up to date with all the discoveries, but he was also so incredibly helpful with recording a ton of extra footage for all of the explanation sections. When I make these videos, I make a list of footage requests that I then send to the runners for me to use that footage during the explanation sections, and usually at most it's around 20 footage requests, with the record being 34 from last year's Super Mariowacity video. For this video though, I had 90 footage requests for Peng, and not only did he deliver all 90, but he delivered a few extras as well. He truly went above and beyond with helping make this video, and I cannot thank him enough, so please be sure to check out his channels, links are in the description. Also, if you want to learn more about Have-Live speedruns or Source Engine speedruns in general, then head on over to SourceRuns.org. It's a community-ran site dedicated to speedruns of Source games, and they also have a YouTube channel to show off some nuts community runs. Links are in the description for those as well. Also, gotta mention, as always, be sure to check out the tomatoanus Discord server. It's a chill place to talk about whatever. It doesn't even have to be speedruns, just come hang out sometime. Alright, so when Peng arrives at the final cutscene, he's going to do a skip called Breen Blast. No, not you. Get the fuck out of here. So the pod that Peng is in is considered to be a vehicle. Now remember 43 minutes and 30 seconds ago when I said being in a vehicle when it gets deleted is the Yesclip glitch, which puts the player in what's referred to as the Yesclip state? Being in a vehicle when it gets deleted is the Yesclip glitch, which puts the player in what's referred to as the Yesclip state. Well, that's part of what goes into Breen Blast. When Breen goes to shoot Morgan Freeman, what actually happens in the game's logic is that the game moves you out of the pod and then deletes the pod. Peng is going to save load lag to prevent himself from fully exiting the pod before it gets deleted, meaning that the pod gets deleted while he's still inside of it. Similar to with the airboat earlier, this puts him in the Yesclip state, meaning that he has no clip and can fly through everything. He'll then fly away from the cutscene that's going on to take out the final boss. While flying, he takes the energy balls / orbs and throws them into the final boss thingy, but afterwards he needs to go back to the cutscene he flew away from. If he doesn't, then the game won't progress. As long as he's standing near the cutscene, he's fine, but he decided to show off that if you enter the nearby elevator, you delete all the NPCs in the area and the game soft locks. After reloading the save though, he gets to view the game's final moments with the run officially ending on the big explosion. Again, thank you on behalf of both myself and Peng for making it this far, but that's all for this video. This was an Any No Voidclip speedrun of Have-Live 2. I've been tomatoanus, and I hope you have an above average day.